Why, hello YouTube. This is Baylor Mage again, and I'm bringing you a new Torchlight video. This is actually the new class for Torchlight. I got a good guide on it. We're doing things quite a little bit different. New class this season's called Lightbringer Rosa, who is basically a paladin-esque kind of build, and you can see in the background there has a nice huge slam that covers most of the screen and pulls in all the mobs. So it's been incredibly fun to play. This might actually be the best season of Torchlight I've played so far. So luckily for me, for our first time ever, this video is actually sponsored by XD. So very happy about that. But frankly, we'd be making it anyway. So moving into the actual build. Alright, so here we are in game. This is the new class. Very paladin looking. She is awesome. I actually love her. But our new skill, Groundshaker. This has been used by quite a few people. You'll see it around on a bunch of different streams right now. But let's just quickly go over the mechanics. The mechanics of this skill are, if you have a Demolisher charge, you do a big area hit. Huge area hit if you've got a Demolisher charge. If you don't, little melee strike. So while we wait for Demolisher charges to hit, it's this little area right in front of us while we wait for the Demolisher charge to regen. So what most people are doing with this is stacking a bunch of Demolisher charge recovery rate. There's a few good reasons for that other than the area. To begin with, the small attack, 172% weapon attack damage. The big one, the Fisher, 861. This is getting overlooked way too hard in my opinion. Very, very, very much more single target when you get the big AoE explosion. However, you only get it with Demolisher charges. So other people are stacking a lot of Demolisher charge cooldown. Other people are using quick return to get 100% Demolisher charge, rolling it on their slates, rolling it on their gear, putting implicits on that give them Demolisher charges back. I decided that was far too much work. So I did something that I think was super interesting. I built my character around this pair of gloves, which I will need to go and get a corrupted pair of at some point to get better. But gains Demolisher charge on critical strike. This has no cooldown at all. The downside of these gloves is that critical strike is set to, it's 100 to 150. My pair's okay. Obviously, I'm going to get a corroded pair. You can go up to 200. Set to. So we can't scale crit multi at all. We cannot scale critical strike damage. It is set. But every single attack, if you crit all the time, which is very easy to do in this build, get 100% crit, every single one of them, always going to be the slam with the Demolisher charge, which means I don't need any cooldown. I don't need the Demolisher charge cooldown supports. I don't need to roll any of it on gear. I don't need any of it on slates. But I can't scale crit multi. That's a pretty big downside. But it turned out to be quite an upside, not a downside, for a mix of two reasons. One, obviously the larger attack gives us significantly more damage every single time, and every single hit is always the Demolisher one. But two, and this is where it kicked into overdrive, there are some really great soul candles from last league that have some pretty hefty downsides on them. One, your main skill is supported by level 20 critical strike damage increase. That's the upside. The downside is negative 70 critical strike rating. The negative 70 doesn't affect us at all. It does nothing. Our critical strike damage is set by the gloves. Now, the big thing here is critical strike damage, which I will find here just so I can show you, actually just does supported skills that hit enemies deal X% additional damage for the supported skill when it lands a crit. This is not critical strike damage rating. I believe it used to be, but it isn't anymore. It's just an additional damage multiplier when you crit. Well, our crit's 100%, and our crit damage is locked. So the negative portion here doesn't do anything. So that turns us into a 7 link. And then the next one across is your main skill is supported by level 20 attack focus. This is 6% additional damage per charge, stacking up to 5 charges. The downside is negative 15 critical strike damage for every stack of focus. That would be negative 75 critical strike damage. That would be a huge downside. But again, we've ignored it. The gloves have allowed us to completely ignore the downside of both of these. So suddenly, I'm in an 8 link for the price of a 4 link. Both of these candles were very cheap. A lot of people don't want to use these specific candles because of the downsides. We ignore them. So because I'm now in an 8 link, I'm actually using Harden in my link. It is worth mentioning that if you were to change that to quick return, it is a little bit more damage. Even though we don't need the demolisher charges, it's 35% additional damage instead of 25% additional damage. But I value this negative 25% additional damage taken for 4 seconds pretty highly, so I've decided to use that. If you wanted to use the more DPS version, you would just put Harden in your Spiral Strike. So, next part of this build that I believe gets pretty interesting is I have automated almost everything. So, we have Bull's Rage, Burst of Anger, and Fixate all on. And all of them set up for 100% uptime and complete automation. So every single one of them is set to Rhythm, which will make it go off automatically. And then set to, I don't even know how to pronounce this, Ceaselessness, I think is how you say that. Which gives you gain a duration equal to 6.8% of the base duration while the supported skill lasts. So this happens on hit, which means as long as I'm attacking, every attack, every 0.6 seconds, I gain 6.8% of the base duration again. And that has extended these to basically just be 100% uptime, all 3 buffs. And because they last so long, we're using Well Fought Battle. That's going to end up being 39% increased effect by the time it's done, fully stacked, which is going to remain most of the time. If I had a bit more energy, there are other supports we could put in there. Obviously, we could use Mania, and I think that that would work, but I don't have enough energy for it right now. Auras are pretty simple. Weapon amplification, acute imbueness. Auto defense stone skin's been pretty good. I'm not 100% sure the auto defense stone skin's worth, but it seems to be helpful. So I'm using it. I've also got a max level reju because I like the regen, and just a low level steadfast to deal with our extra mana. Our attacks are free in this build. We do not spend mana. So you just level this to whatever level is appropriate. If you get a little bit of extra minus sealed mana, you can up the level of this, get more armor. If you have a little less, you lower the level. If you need to get rid of it, get rid of it. It is only 1,000 armor, but there's not really much else we can use that tiny bit of mana for. So that's the way I've done it. I've also put vulnerability and abysmal hatred to make it more efficient on just an innate curse, so it triggers automatically, and seal conversion because it uses such a tiny amount of life. So those are all really interesting. So the next interesting thing is our mechanic. Our hero mechanic is in this window. Murderous Intent. Murderous Intent is very cool. There is a lot of stuff that stacks off Murderous Intent. Specifically, eventually, I would like to change to this one, which will require better gear, but we'll get into that in a minute. But that'll be for every 4 Murderous Intent. You lose a little bit of area, but gain a lot of damage. But it also consumes Murderous Intent quicker. We will be able to maintain that. I will get to that when I get to another section in a minute. For now, I'm using this one, and this is the one you'll start with. The important part here is that you get 1% spell block for every 2% attack block. This whole class scales off block and attack block. We want a lot of it, so we cap that really easily with that one. For every 1% block ratio you currently have, you get Murderous Intent Restoration, which is great. Every 3 murderous intent you have, restore 0.1% of missing life and energy shield on block. So we get a lot of on block recovery with 100% block, 100% spell block. Fantastic for tankiness. Over here, for every 5 murderous intent you get, you gain 1% additional attack and cast speed for all units in the Holy Domain. So as far as I can tell, this affects me and the enemies. That's actually okay because we want them to hit us. We want block anyway. And really we should be building quite tanky enough to face tank most things anyway. So it's actually fine. Blocking more is good for us. That's great. And then again, for every 5 murderous intent, you have plus 2% additional damage to enemies inside your Holy Domain. Your Holy Domain is the class trait. This little bubble here. It's not incredibly huge, but we can move it super often. So it just moves with us whenever we want. We just press the button, it goes down again. So that is the zone we need them to stand in. So that's fine. Then we've got extra radius, extra block ratio. For every extra block ratio, the upper limit of murderous intent +2 up to 150. That's great. And for every 4 current murderous intent, -1 murderous intent restoration. Now here's the thing. This only affects the restoration you're supposed to get from blocking. So this sort of tries to stop us from stacking too much murderous intent and using the innate mechanic to recover it because we get too high. So we got around that by using 2 of these. Now mine are rolled only 4 and 4. So I actually only have about 95% uptime. You can get 5 rolls instead of 4 rolls. That'll get me 100%. That'll be great. I will upgrade to those. But restore for murderous intent for 5 seconds when taking damage. This felt really good when I first got it until I realized that sometimes you just don't get hit. If you're good at dodging, you don't get hit. What am I going to do about that? I need to get hit. Well, I decided to do damage to myself, and that's where Burst of Anger came from. When it procs, does some damage to me. Not a relevant amount of damage, an irrelevant amount of damage, but it's my own regen. It does damage. It counts. It gives me my murderous intent back. So that's been how I'm dealing with that. That's how I'm capping that. There are plenty of other useful stats like less additional dot damage taken or upping the cap of murderous intent. You can put anything with those, but it is important to have 2 of them. Then we've got this one, which is my extra one. When casting a trait skill, if murderous intent is higher than 75%, which it always is, enemies take 18% increased damage. This rolls up higher. There's a higher tier of that as well. That's great. I'm stacking a lot of murderous intent. Over here, the only important thing for me is for every 5% fervor rating, murderous intent upper limit +1. I like that one. I went for area for my second stat. There are a lot of different second stats you could go for. I just like having full screen area. So I will show you the skill tree, but I will show you the skill tree over here. Okay. All right. So I also built a planner for this. Now you might notice this planner is a little bit empty compared to the full planners that people sometimes link you. The reason for that is that I have only included the things that are base important to the skill and to the class. And to the build in general. There are a lot of things that are going to be personal preference. You're going to want to get life, resistances, armor. I don't need to fill all those out for you. What you need to know is what is the important things. So there's a few important things. One of those important things is to make sure that we have 100% block and 100% spell block. That's really important for the build. These nodes right here in our ranger tree are super efficient, so we're probably taking them at all times. But there are plenty of other block nodes around our tree. I have been putting points in or taking points out of extra block chance if I need it. If my current gear set has me at 96% block, I will respec a point and take this. If my current gear set has me a little bit low on spell block, I will take out a point and put it in this one for attack and spell block if I need it. So we don't want to use anything other than this area here because this is the most efficient one. We'll always have that. We don't want any of the extra points, but we take them whenever we need them, depending on where our gear set is at. So that's great. We will go over what we've got, which is 35% additional fizz. This is all fizz damage scaling. I have taken the have fervor effect thing here, except that I actually haven't. I've taken critical strikes, ignore armor. Now that's a less important one. You need the have fervor one. You need that. You're going to start with that. But I got the fervor on my divinity slate. I really wanted both of these. So I ended up just picking the cheapest one that I could get between those two and then just pick the other one. So that worked out fine. There are a lot of things that we like here though, that we are going to be a little different than normal. One, crit strike rating, great. However, we're getting most of our crit strike through fervor effect. So when the build is decently high level, try speccing out some points out of crit rating and just sit on a dummy for a minute and see if you have 100% crit. It'll be really easy to know if you don't, because this little diamond here, this is the demolisher charge cooldown. So if that is full, you have a demolisher charge. If it is empty, you do not. So what we're looking for is we want it to blink at the rate of our attack speed. It goes away, it uses the demolisher charge, you hit, it instantly fills back up because it's critted. If there's a gap, if it turns off and then doesn't turn back on for a little bit, and there's some gaps in there, you don't have enough crit rating, you need more crit rating, which means more fervor effect or crit on the tree. One of the two. Other really important nodes, we do want to have paralysis somewhere. You don't need this node if you've got it on a slate, but you want it somewhere. Really good buff. These ones you would take regardless all of the time. Huge flat, massive flat, great. Moving on to the next one. This is Ronin, I think it's called. Again, we've taken some block here because it came with really efficient damage. So these are probably the last attack block ones I would take out if I got it other places on my gear. They're the last ones I would take out because they're pretty efficient, but I'm okay with them, but we could just swap them to life if we needed. My current build needs exactly this one node for 3% spell block. That's the node I'm currently short on my current build, so I have it. But again, you would not take it if you get spell block another way. These are all very efficient nodes, high numbers. These are damage and attack speed, which is great. Fervor effect is fantastic. We love that. That's how we're getting almost all of our crit. So we're always going to want to take that. I also take this. Gain 3 fervor rating on crit. We have 100% crit, so it just maxes our fervor immediately. This can also appear on slates. If you get it on a slate, drop it. Melee damage is great. Additional weapon damage is pretty huge as well. But we don't need any of these. We don't do shadow strikes. We don't need demolisher charge regen. We don't do steep strikes. So the additional there is amazing, but we don't need to follow up anywhere. And weapon speed is arguable. This attack speed, weapon speed one, probably not my best damage nodes that I have. I could probably get more damage by dropping them. But for me personally, I like to move around fast. I like to move around real fast. Spiral strike is my choice for movement. You could leap slam as well. Doesn't matter. I like spiral strike. The more attack speed I can get, the better. Next over here, we have the 20% additional melee damage. And then we have this one. The fervor rating gains base effect. 2 critical strike rating per fervor rating. The important part here is this adds to the base effect of fervor, which is why we're stacking fervor effect, because we get 100% fervor effect, then that's 4 critical strike rating per fervor, which we have 100 of. If we get 200%, then it's 6, etc. This is where most of our crit is coming from, and it's how we've gotten away with critting without bothering to waste points in crit damage, because that doesn't do anything. So I have the fervor effect, but I don't have the critical strike damage per fervor because it doesn't do anything. We're locked. So that's great. Other than that, everything in this tree that I have is most of what I consider to be the important default nodes. There are plenty more to go after that. This is all going to be up to your current gear. If you happen to have really good gear and you've got 45,000 armor and a good amount of regen and everything good off your gear and you want damage, take some damage, take some attack speed. If you're doing a lot of damage because you've crafted a disgusting sword like I did, then take some defense nodes, take some regen nodes, take some more armor. Armor's great. We love that in this build. I also did not fill out our packed spirits because in game I just use drop spirits through the whole thing. I actually don't use the packed part at all to build the power of my character, which means I need nothing. My whole thing is filled out in quant, which means if you want to be more powerful, you can put on some damage ones. You can use some res ones if you need them. This has been a fantastic class. I have absolutely loved. I will probably continue to play this. I expect in maybe a week or two, there'll be a min-max version update because I am very much enjoying it. Whew. All right, that was a lot of information. I will link the builder and the build code from this season in the description. The build code, unfortunately, I'm on the Asia server, so the build code will only work for people on the Asia server. The new build codes that you can share in game, they're region locked. So I've got one for the Asia server. I'll share that. Otherwise, we have the max roll build planner and that will work fantastically. That is all I have. I love this class. I will see everybody next time. Goodbye.